Bonsoir. I'm John Heilemann.
I'm Mark Halperin, and avec all due respect to Jeb Bush, we'd stick around to critique you, but our French work week is just about over.
Oui, oui.
On the show tonight,
This is the music I find as funny as anything.
We just flew in from Colorado, and boy, are our arms tired because we spent the day replying to emails from campaign staffers and our colleagues in the media about one John Ellis Bush. While the Royals were rolling over the Mets, Marco Rubio was rocking. Last night, he stole the exclamation point from Jeb and replaced it with a ticking time bomb. Jeb was flat. He was lame. He got a D+ in the semi-official barometer of campaign performances, a.k.a. my debate report cards. And today, Jeb tried again to stick it to Rubio in an interview with Fox News that he did from Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
The point is that pursuing your own ambitions at the expense of service of others is wrong. It's the wrong way to go. Marco's my friend. I admire him greatly. He is a gifted politician for sure. But I think we need to focus on who can lead, who can forge consensus, who can solve problems. And that's my approach here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire over the next day and a half, and I'll be campaigning hard all across this country with a message that I can fix the things that are broken in Washington.
What happened to Jeb Bush last night and what happens next is the talk of the political world. And John, you write in your piece about what's going on and suggest that Jeb Bush's campaign is pretty close to done. How dire do you think his predicament is now?
I think it's pretty dire. And the reason I think it's dire is not because the performance, no one performance is going to kill a politician, not someone with his resources, anything else. I think the problem is that this was such a revealing performance. There was so much on the line, so much has gone wrong for him, so many people were looking. His world, other people's worlds, all saying, can he rise to the occasion? And not only did he not rise to the occasion, but he shrunk from the occasion. And I think that just tells you a lot about the fact that he is not up to being the nominee.
We did a call with some of his bundlers this afternoon. Our colleagues report that he's telling them he's ready to change, he's ready to get better, he's ready to fight. Look, I've been stunned, as you have today, at the number of people who like him, some who support him, who say basically they don't know how he comes back. He's losing some of his donors already. He will lose some of his donors for sure. And some of the undecideds will go to Rubio and elsewhere. But I still think when there's no establishment candidate in the race, when there's another debate in just over a week, and when Jeb Bush has a lot of assets, I still think he's no longer the most likely nominee, to say the least.
Yes.
He is no longer, I think, in the top 3, but he can still do it. He can. He can still do it.
I don't think so. The man of the hour, or the 2 hours and a half, was clearly Marco Antonio Rubio. He took Jeb's premeditated attack about his Senate attendance record and turned it right on its head. Mark, is Marco Rubio now the Republican frontrunner?
He's not, but he has now put himself unambiguously positioned to be the establishment choice. He will raise more money off of this. How much more? Big question. And will he catch on with voters? You know, you write in your piece that you think his poll standing is going to go up. It may well. But let's see if it goes up in a sustained way. And I ask the question I ask on this show every other day.
What state's he going to win? Well, I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know when we did our focus groups in Iowa and New Hampshire most recently, voters were impressed with his performance in Simi Valley. That one foreign policy section. They talked about it. They thought he was impressed. We showed it to him.
And his
they
numbers
liked it.
didn't move very much.
His numbers didn't move very much. But this moment, this Jeb Bush moment, is going to get 100 times more attention. It already is out there. Everyone's seen it over the course of this day. So I think his poll numbers are going to go up. And he was already on a roll with elites going before this moment. So I think, look, I don't necessarily think now Marco Rubio is going to be the nominee. I still think Donald Trump's more likely nominee than Marco Rubio. But he is in the best position right now to consolidate the establishment vote than Jeb Bush is or anybody else.
Let me tell you a secret little thing he did yesterday, which is really good for him long term. When he was criticized for his spending habits, which is one of his big vulnerabilities in the view of people who are familiar with his record, he linked it up to a criticism of the media. When these stories come up again now, he's going to go to the conservative base of the party and say, this is just the left-wing media trying to attack me. He has in some ways inoculated himself against these attacks, at least within the context of the nomination fight. Well, very smart and very, very powerful.
Yes, and I think, you think about the opposition research mentality and the opposition research focus of the Bush campaign, right? they're going after him on the Senate attendance record. There may be some good reasons for that.
And Jeb did it, as we said, again today.
Yeah, he did it again today. And I think that part of what that is maybe some weird fixation with that issue. But also, I think it's because they realize that he's successfully starting to inoculate himself, or has inoculated himself, with the help of the New York Times that overplayed its hand against a lot of the personal financial stuff that people thought he was going to be more vulnerable
on. The Times' early story on this had some flaws in it. And it's really helped him. Look, if the logic of the Bush campaign is to be the last establishment candidate standing, the question to me now is a super PAC going to go after Rubio, which will be risky, but some people think necessary and inevitable. All right. There was another shining star out of Boulder, and that was Ted Cruz, the Texas senator, who earned special big brownie points for elbowing the mainstream media and also cracking a joke about Colorado's special brownies. John, who is positioned better at this point amongst the young senators from big mega states, Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio, to be the nominee?
Well, Rubio is better positioned because, we both pointed out, there is no clear establishment alternative. In that lane right now, the establishment doesn't have a front runner. Rubio could be that front runner. Ted Cruz has two people in front of him in his lane, Donald Trump and Ben Carson. So I think Cruz did himself a lot of good last night, but he didn't do anything to get rid of Ben Carson and Donald Trump. Maybe those guys will fade away, but right now Cruz is still third in the anti-establishment bracket. That makes him less likely than Rubio.
He is. Now let's see, when we talk about Rubio getting some bundlers, some additional fundraising, his fundraising last quarter was disappointing by every measure.
And Cruz's was not.
And Cruz's was I'd say, almost overwhelming. The other thing about Cruz last night, Rubio talked more than anybody on the stage and made the most of his time, as did Ted Cruz. And I'll say again about Cruz, when he does well, his already high confidence gets even higher.
The thing about Cruz,
this guy's aggressively going for the nomination.
The question about Cruz, though, is he did this thing last night where he basically took the most effective thing Newt Gingrich did in 2012, which was to mow the liberal media, even though CNBC is not really liberal in any meaningful way. It works with Republican audiences for sure, but it's not a card you can play over and over and over again. You got to find a next act if you're going to make it a big impression.
He does play it all the time. He just happened to play in a high-profile way.
Well, I'm saying, when you get to the next debate, you can't go back to that. Right? We saw with Gingrich, it got old after the first couple times.
So we'll see if they do.
Yes, well, good point. But you see what I'm saying? He's got to figure out another way to break through, and part of it, that's a fierce and effective card to play. But there are other things that Cruz has to now do, I think, in order to put himself in the top tier.
There's no doubt, though, that these two guys now, from today forward, are going to get more scrutiny. We talked about Rubio and the luck he's got on scrutiny. Let's see when the scrutiny comes on Cruz how he does.
All right. Going into last night, famous hat wearer Donald Trump and famous low-talking doctor Ben Carson were the co-front runners in some sense. So, Mark, my question for you about those two big names in Republican politics is, how did they come out of last night?
Both came out just fine. Look, the establishment filter is always going to look at the performance of Trump and Carson and find things to criticize. They're going to say Carson's vague and weird, and Trump's either too hot or too out of it or whatever. I thought they both did fine. I graded them both below the top grades.
Yeah.
And I think they both, right now, are focused on not just their performance on the stump, but their fundamentals. Their fundamentals in terms of their organizing. They both want to have operations that can compete with the establishment candidate.
I got to say, I thought that Carson, I agree with that in general. You graded Carson a little better than Trump. I actually thought last night was Donald Trump's best debate performance. I don't think he was that great at the Fox debate. I didn't think he was that great in Simi Valley. Now, obviously, it didn't affect his poll standing. Last night, I thought he gave a pretty carefully modulated performance. Some people were like, well, Trump seems subdued. He's not. I thought he was funny. He was not so as caustic as he's been before. He aimed his darts at targets that were effective. His boasting in the way that he did about getting the debate shortened, which is both true and something that everyone could kind of applaud. I thought actually, as a debater, I thought Trump was better last night than he's been so far.
My belief that we might be headed towards a Trump Kasich ticket hit a little pothole yesterday.
Oh, I'd say so.
Because Kasich tried to start the debate.
Oh my God.
Trump. And Trump went back after him hard.
And he went back hard on the Lehman thing. And in the process, not only did he go back at him on Lehman and shut Kasich down completely, but he allied himself with Carson in that response. He said, you almost lost a lot of money from me and my friend Ben Carson over here. Very interesting that he decided to do that. He seemed annoyed with Kasich.
It's going to be fascinating also to see going forward in these next debates, because last night I don't think anyone anticipated Rubio and Cruz dominating as much. People thought the focus would be on Carson and Bush and to some extent Trump. Bush talked the least. Let's see what happens in the next debate.
This race is so fluid, so fluid. All right, now it's time to turn to the latest episode of Better Call Paul. Congressman Paul Ryan is now officially House Speaker Paul Ryan, bidding adieu to the outgoing speaker, or with the outgoing speaker bidding adieu himself. He got predictably emotional.
The hill had twists, the hill had turns, and even a few tears. Nothing wrong with that. But let me tell you, it was just perfect. Never forget, we're the luckiest people on the earth.
No more waterworks. All right, here's how Speaker Ryan greeted his new subjects in the House.
We will not duck the tough issues. We will take them head on. We are going to do all we can do so that working people get their strength back and people not working get their lives back. No more favors for the few, opportunity for all. That is our motto.
4 weeks ago, House Republicans were seen as not merely wildly dysfunctional, but so wildly dysfunctional that they were a toxic threat to the party's brand. So, Mark, with Paul Ryan now with his grip firmly around that speaker's gavel, is that analysis null and void?
The steam is way out of that. I mean, not only Ryan with the gavel and the smooth transition, but the fact that they dealt with the debt ceiling, they're going to have dealt with the budget when the Senate passes it, no government shutdown. I think Paul Ryan stepping up, and behind the scenes, Boehner, Mitch McConnell, and others making sure not only Ryan took over, but that he got with a clean slate. I think the narrative that the House Republicans were going to ruin the party brand, hurt their chance of winning the White House, that seems taken care of for now. There are problems ahead, but the major things are really dealt with.
We know that Ryan is seeing the speakership as much, rather than as being a parliamentarian or a fundraiser, as being a spokesman.
Message platform.
And make it as a message platform, right? I thought, watching that thing on the plane as we were flying back, I thought to myself, man, this is a much better look for the Republican Party. Just generationally, we've never seen a speaker in our lifetimes who's walked up and looked younger than us, younger than we are now. You looked at that generational contrast. You know, Paul Ryan will be criticized by
ideology. Than you.
Yes, right. He'll be criticized by the left on ideological grounds, but just in terms of the brand and image of the House, it just looks so much better for Republicans.
John Boehner's a great guy, but there's an upgrade in some ways. All right, coming up next, another guy who had a great perf last night, Chris Christie, our post-mortem interview with the Jersey governor, after this word from our sponsors. Last night, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie was on point in the debate. He slammed Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, was openly skeptical about the feds, and body-checked the media. So, being the media, we caught up with him in Boulder this morning to talk about the debate, his Jersey record, the biggest winner, Rubio, and the biggest loser, Jeb. Governor, after last night, how would you characterize the state of the Republican nomination fight?
You know, he who endures conquers. It's going to be a long race, and it's going to be a tough race because it's a nomination worth having. Because Hillary Clinton is a deeply flawed but difficult and tough opponent on the other side, and so it's going to be a long, tough race. But I'm in it for the long haul, and I think last night we showed people that I'm tough, I'm tested, and I'm mature, and that's what you're going to want on the other side of the stage against Hillary.
Is there a front runner in the race now?
No, it never has been. I mean, there has not been a front runner in this race. This race is wide open. When you look at all the different candidates and how this works, no, it's not nowhere near that yet. And remember, in late October of 2011, Herman Cain was first in the polls, so we know how that turned out.
Remind people how old you are.
I am 53 years old.
You keep talking about maturity and experience. Do you have more of that than Marco Rubio?
Oh, well, I certainly have more experience than Marco. And there's no question about that. I've been a governor in one of the toughest states to govern in the country in the last 6 years, and I was the United States Attorney for 7 years before that, running one of the largest offices in the country. So yeah, I definitely have more experience, and more experience as an executive, and that's what really matters. I mean, listen, let's face it. I like Marco; he's a good friend of mine. But you know what? We've already had a one-term United States Senator as president, and we saw how well he ran the government, and Marco even compared himself to him last night. So I don't think that's the kind of experience that we necessarily want, but Marco's a good guy, a credible candidate. But if you're asking on experience, there's no question I have more experience on the executive side.
What about the other word you've been using, maturity? Not personal maturity, but in terms of politics. Do you have more political maturity than Marco Rubio?
Well, listen, I have more political maturity than anybody else on that stage because I've worked in the toughest media market in the country for the last 13 years as a Republican. And you take a lot of hits and a lot of knocks, and I certainly have. And here I am, standing and speaking my mind and continuing to move forward. And I think that gives you an enormous amount of toughness and maturity. And that's what you're going to need against Hillary, because let's face it, Mark, you know that that race, they think it was hard last night. It was tiddlywinks compared to what it's going to be come September of 2016.
What aspects of what you've accomplished as governor of New Jersey, what sort of policy ideas, broad proposals would you take to Washington and say, as president, I'll do for the country what I did for New Jersey?
Well, first of all, take on the really tough issues first. You've got to be willing to take those on. So in New Jersey, we took on property taxes in the beginning. We have slowed the growth of property taxes to record levels now in New Jersey. We took on the pension and benefit fight, and we have made the pension and benefit system much better in New Jersey. We have some more work to do, but we've made it much better than it was when I came in. We took on teacher tenure. We need to take on teacher tenure across the whole country so that we can improve our educational system for our kids. And lastly, it'll be an attitude. I want this job. I'm not going to sit here and complain about how hard it is, how difficult it is to do this. I'm not going to complain about any of that stuff. I'm here because I want the job. I'm going to bring that attitude to the job every day, and people can tell, and that makes a difference.
Some people have raised questions about your economic record in New Jersey. So again, what have you done besides in terms of pension reform? What have you done in terms of private sector job growth and economic development? Again, ideas that are applicable to what you could do as president.
Sure. Well, first of all, Americans for Tax Reform has said I vetoed more tax increases than any governor in American history. I'm going to stand up to try to make sure that taxes do not increase on the American people and in fact get lower. Secondly, new statistic that just came out yesterday, New Jersey's jobless claims are the lowest they've been in 15 years. That shows the strength of the New Jersey economy. We've helped to have the private sector generate over 200,000 new private sector jobs in the last 5.5 years in a state that in the 8 years before I became governor had zero net private sector job growth.
What are the policy ideas undergirding that again you would do as president?
Sure. It's lower taxes, Mark. It's significantly less regulation. I froze regulation in New Jersey and then cut it back by 1/3 over where it was with my predecessor. And it's making sure that you free up in the economic realm people in the state to do what they do best and get government out of the way. And if we're doing anything, we should be trying to give them a little nudge in the back and help them along. We'll bring all those principles to Washington.
The current foreign policy challenges that the country is facing, which ones do you consider to be the most pressing that you wish President Obama were being more aggressive on right now?
I would say there's 4. First, the situation in Syria is desperate. The president needs to be assertive. He needs to set up a no-fly zone, and he needs to look Vladimir Putin in the eye and tell him enough is enough. Secondly, it's Russia, and making sure that we engage them both economically and diplomatically to try to improve that relationship and to set limits to it. Third is China, the most important and most complex relationship the next president will have to deal with. And we want to move that forward both economically and make sure that we contain them militarily. And the fourth is to make sure that we get better relationships with our neighbors in Canada and Mexico. They're our biggest trading partners. We need to have better relationships with them, not only to improve our economy, but also to make a stronger North American continent to work to try to bring energy independence to Western Europe away from Putin and Russia.
I've been laughed at by people who said he had no chance. I think he's got a good chance now. Maybe not the best chance.
I'm pretty sure I've laughed at you.
Yeah, you have.
In fact,
yeah. But now you're eating a little crow because Chris Christie could be the nominee now. And anyone who denies that is not paying attention.
Well, I think there's no doubt that, as we were talking about before, the race is more fluid than it's ever been. It is true, as you were pointing out. I believe Jeb Bush cannot be the nominee anymore, but I do think that because of that, it creates an opening on the establishment side. Marco Rubio is most likely to fill it, but Chris Christie was good last night, and he's gotten better and better. And the thing that's interesting is he's not just gotten better and better in these debates, but he gets better at the back half of the debate. He starts slow, but by the end of the debate, he really hits his stride. He has not had the big breakthrough moment, but he's getting there, and I'm starting to think I'm ready to take the fork out of him and say he's not totally done.
If there's a Christie-Rubio face-off, it would be fascinating. All right, our thanks to Governor Christie and his team, and when we come back, Jeb versus Marco, the fight for Florida. More on the Sunshine Showdown after this word from our sponsors.
All right, so everybody's seen the clip of Jeb trying to slam Rubio over a Senate attendance record and then getting slammed back 5 times as hard. That wasn't the only problem with Jeb Bush last night, not the only thing that made his night so atrocious, even worse than that of the Mets. Let's take a look at all the elements of Jeb's bad night.
The biggest tax increase happened under the watch of Barack Obama, and spending's gone up. You find a Democrat that's for cutting taxes, cutting spending $10, I'll give them a warm kiss. I'm 7-0 in my fantasy football league. If they can't regulate themselves, then the NFL needs to look at this, moving away from them a little bit, and there should be some regulation. I have no clue whether the federal government's the proper place. My instinct is to say hell no, just about everything about the federal government.
Hold on a second.
I need to interject.
Carl, are we really talking?
So here's,
Carl, are we
say
really
this.
talking about getting
we have
government involved in fantasy football? We have, wait a second, we have $19 trillion in debt. We have people out of work. We have ISIS and Al Qaeda attacking us. And we're talking about fantasy football? Can we stop?
Okay, so that was Chris Christie showing how Jeb Bush should have been answering that question. Just break it down for me, what you thought was so bad about it. You gave him a D+. Pretty low grade. What was so bad about Jeb?
Well, the big moment with Rubio was obviously a disaster, but he talked less than anybody. He wasn't the least bit commanding. And if you're going to come in and say, my premise is that I'm the only president on the stage, I'm the most qualified, you have to be, and you have to be more fluid. I mean, there's a personality inside Jeb Bush that is fluid and commanding. You got to show up, do it, and he knew in advance he had to do it.
He didn't get that many questions last night, and there was part of this fight between the campaign manager Danny Diaz and the people at CNBC was he didn't get enough time. That may or may not be true, like that he didn't get quote enough time. But to me, the bigger, more powerful thing was that with the time he had, he did nothing useful. Like literally, I mean, I went through the transcript after watching it and looked at all those exchanges again. There was not one exchange where, with the exception of the Rubio exchange, where he was at least trying to make a point. The rest of them, I didn't know what his message was. I didn't know what he was trying to do in any given answer. It was no moment where you said, I see what his strategy is here, the message he's trying to drive, the personality he's trying to portray.
He's telling his donors today, I get it. I got to do better.
Different.
I'll be different. You're not going to get very many more chances. But I will say we disagree on this. If he has a great debate performance the next time, the problem is the press and the moderators. People are just not looking to him at the center of attention anymore. He's to fight his way back.
We don't disagree. We don't disagree about that. If he has a great debate performance, I'll change my mind. I'll say he's revived his candidacy. My point is that consistently throughout this year, he's not given a great performance in any of these debates, and he's been all the problems on display last night have been characteristic problems of his performance throughout his candidacy. So I just don't think he's going to change.
Yeah, we said before that Jeb Bush didn't get in the race to fight Donald Trump. He also didn't get in the race to criticize Marco Rubio's attendance rate.
No, it's just
the notion that he's going to win this arguing with Rubio on something he doesn't really care about.
The guy who was like, I want to run joyfully, has not seemed joyful very much, and going negative is not what joy is all about. All right, so we're done with that, and we'll be right back. We are live 24/7 on BloombergPolitics.com. Starting next week, we are on for an hour every day. Tomorrow, the last half-hour show.
I don't know what accent that is. I have no idea.
I do not know either.
Right.
I do not know either, but
Until tomorrow, as the Coneheads say, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Sayonara.